Tucker Muldooney, pleased to meet you.
A city girl.
Monica, Chicago.
A rich kid.
Welcome to Kenma.
Listen to me. They shared the good times.
Why do you work so hard to hide this beauty from the world?
And the bad times.
I wanted to be just like you. I wanted to have it all.
It was the best time of their lives. Kirk Cameron, Listen to Me. Rated PG-13. Starts Friday, May 5th at a theater near you.
Howdy, folks. We are back with your favorite episode. Deep Dive Series episode. It is 2024. Happy New Year. I am your host, Jeff Galashaw, at Unfinished B2, even though it's written there. And with me, as always, is my co-host, technical support, brother from another mother, Andre Joseph of MJ Epics Productions.
Justice for Julie McCullough.
Yes, that should give you a hint as to what movie we're talking about in this episode. If not, you probably haven't seen it anyway. It's a little movie by the name of Listen to Me, starring, yes, your favorite and mine, Christian actor Kirk Cameron, where it's about a debate team with him, Jami Gertz. Roy Scheider is their mentor teacher, and they go to a competition in Washington, D.C., and it's written and directed by Douglas Day Stewart, who wrote An Officer and a Gentleman, among other many films. And Andre, you picked this movie, so you talk about why you felt this film needed to be talked about, or what drove you to pick it.
So let me give a little bit of a background on this particular picture. So I didn't grow up with this movie. I had never heard of it or seen it for many, many years. But I knew of Kirk Cameron, of course, from Growing Pains, and another movie we may cover one day called Like Father, Like Son with Dudley Moore. But I knew of Douglas Day Stewart because he wrote Officer and Gentleman, and he directed one other movie before this called Thief of Hearts, which was a Don Simpson, Jerry Bruckheimer production with Stephen Bauer, in an attempt to make Stephen Bauer into a big movie star, which didn't happen at that time. So I remember seeing that, and I'm like, what else has this guy done? Because it seemed like this kind of like killed his career because it wasn't a hit. And I go on IMDb and I see this other movie, Listen to Me, with Kirk Cameron and Roy Scheider. It's like, this is interesting. I didn't see it for a very long time, up until the pandemic. And I just found it on YouTube, and it was under its other title called Talking Back. So that kind of threw me off, but I realized they had some territories, I think, changed the title on it. And I watched it already knowing about Kirk Cameron as Christian man and all that stuff. So I knew all that stuff going in, but I was a little bit surprised with just how much of that Christian stuff was already starting at the point when he made this particular picture, which is so weird in itself. So just to give a little background, Douglas Day Stewart, he actually had written a movie based on experiences that he had in high school. He was on his high school debate team, and for a time, he not only was interested in that story, but he had a friend in UCLA who was also an actual debate coach and brought him on as a technical advisor on the picture. And I guess they sold the script to Jerry Weintraub, who had started his production company with Columbia Pictures, and they greenlit this movie. And I guess they figured, Kirk Cameron was going to be the next big thing. He was going to be the next Michael J. Fox, so let's get him in this movie, which at the time was called Mismatch. And originally, it was him and James Gardner that was supposed to play the debate coach. But James Gardner, right before production began, he was having some heart issues and he had to undergo surgery. So he was taken out of it. And for a time, they were considering actually Jack Lemmon to replace him. But I guess that didn't work out financially or whatever. So at the 11th hour, they got Roy Scheider to do it. And he puts on something of a Texas twang, but not heavy. It's still New York City-centric actor, Roy Scheider, playing the debate coach. And so many reasons this movie is weirdly standing out. So let's talk about the obvious thing, which is the plot. So as you mentioned before, it's about all these kids, part of this Texas debate team in this college. Everybody has their different personalities and their ambitions. Kirk Cameron's like the country hick who is pro-life. We'll get into that in a second too. And
Big shot.
You know, he's kind of like, I guess, the maverick of this movie. He wants to be the best. You got Jami Gertz as like the Chicago girl that comes in who's pro-choice, and she has a hard time getting interested in anybody. Like Kirk Cameron has interest in her, but she doesn't want to give in to anything like that. Then later on, you find out why she's so guarded with her feelings. And then you have the third actor in the film.
Tim Quill.
Tim Quill, yes. He's like the rich kid. His father, I think, is one of the boosters of the school. And he, you know, as good as he is at debate, it's not his passion. He really wants to be a playwright. And so he starts getting mentally screwed up and leads to some very melodramatic moments that really bring this movie down several notches. So we'll get into that too. But the center of the movie itself is this debate team that's obviously competing all over the country. And in the finals, they're supposed to do a debate with Harvard in front of the Supreme Court on abortion rights. And so this whole movie is driven by this idea of, you know, pro-life, pro-choice, and Cameron and Gertz not only have to be partnered together reluctantly, but they have to do the opposite arguments at the final act. And because this subject was sensitive and still sensitive today, what Jerry Weintraub was more interested in trying to promote this movie with that subject matter at the forefront, believing that the controversy would get everybody talking and run out to go and see it in the theaters. Everybody else was like, but it's Kirk Cameron, you know, he's popular on TV, he's a heartthrob. We should focus on just pumping up Kirk Cameron. So it's a very weird marketing strategy that they did where they wanted to highlight the subject matter. But if you watch the TV spots and the trailers, they try to make it like this fun and loose kind of high school, college level movie that's got comedy and romance and hard rock music by David Foster, who produced all of Chicago's music. And I think it threw people off so much that that's one of the reasons why it tanked, because they were expecting like a fun Kirk Cameron movie, and instead they get a movie about abortion rights and debating. Like, I didn't sign up for this. And then they tried to even push it even more when it came out on the video. They put labels on it, like, oh, be careful, fair warning, this is about abortion. And I'm like, no, we're not going to let our kids watch this shit. You know, clear cell, we're not promoting this movie. So yeah, that was like one of the things that stood out. And then the other thing was how weirdly casted this movie was, because in an era where on television you had so many movies that were made with all the actors from all these sitcoms and 1 hour dramas doing like these 2 hour made for TV movie specials. This is a theatrical film where not only do you have Kirk Cameron, who's coming off of Growing Pains, but then they litter it with like so many other familiar faces from TV shows in that era. You got Dan Schneider as one of the debate partners. You have Peter DeLuise from 21 Jump Street, who I'm thinking is like just some football kid. No, he's on the debate team too. I'm like, we never even see this kid debate. He has like that montage where you don't even hear what he's saying, and he's acting up, doing his stick. And why is he in this movie? And Yellow Smith, who's like barely in it, and this is before The Simpsons, she has a supporting part in here as well. Christopher Atkins, you know, like his part's totally unrecognizable. They threw everybody into this, and it's like, this should be an all-star cast, but we're just downplaying everybody except for Schneider. So it's just a weird, like, this feels like this could be a TV movie rather than a theatrical release in that sense. I could go on and on about it, but, you know, let's get your thoughts.
Well, I remember those ads. I don't remember the TV trailers. I do remember the poster, and I remember the video ads. Again, more selling this as like some kind of teen drama romance. And, you know, I didn't even know it was an abortion movie until I saw it, like you, during the pandemic era. You know, and then I was less like, oh, that's what this movie was about. But I mean, first of all, Kirk Cameron turned down Say Anything to make this film. And I feel like it's kind of obvious that this might have been more on his spiritual side, or what he was looking for spiritually at the time.
Well, you know what he said at that time? He was like, "Oh, this is a movie not about kids drinking and partying. It's about being intelligent and responsible." Yeah, and nobody remembers this shit, but everybody still talks about Say Anything. They always look at, John Cusack with the boombox, and that is still iconic. This shit is not.
Well, I think I can see his reasoning at the time, other than his Christian values. Well, because I guess again, Say Anything at heart, while it's still remembered, is still a romance movie, and would end up playing kind of a sensitive misfit, which kind of is almost Mike Severish. Him playing intelligent, kind of a hustling debater. It's a little bit different for at least for him to play, so he might have been attracted to that. I like that the film, even though it's supposed to be an ensemble, I like that aspect of it, even though the movie does boil down to Jami Gertz, Roy Scheider, Kirk Cameron, Tim Quill, most of the movie. But like even Amanda Peterson from Can't Buy Me Love, rest in peace, her little, kind of supporting role and, feeling romance or love for the first time, even though she has a disability. I thought that was kind of, sweet in this movie. I wish they wouldn't have said it at Texas, because then everybody tries and either avoids their little Southern accent. Looking at you, Cameron. And I guess Jami Gertz is like, look, I ain't even gonna try. So just say I'm from Chicago. So, I'll admit, Jami Gertz is probably the one person who got me the most interested in watching it. And I remember in teen magazines at the time, this movie was so heavily promoted. And I also always wondered, who's the guy who was in the trailer? I never saw him in anything else. So I was like, oh, Tim Quill. Yep, still never heard of him, really. But I kind of feel like the thing about the playwright was really the author putting himself in there, like, yeah, this is what I went through at the time. And, obviously not the same ending. But I feel like Kirk Cameron was the person he wanted to be in the movie. Like, yeah, I'm just hustling. I'm working my way up. I'm getting all the ladies. Hopefully he wasn't Dan Schneider. I guess, yeah, like you said, you have a lot of people who were on television. But see, then you get like people like Roy Scheider, and then you have like Amanda Peterson, who were, you still had that thing where sitcom stars were trying to break into the movies. So you can understand why maybe some of the younger people were like, yay, I get to be in a movie that makes it to theaters with Kirk Cameron. But then you have people like Roy Scheider, at the time, Amanda Peterson, who give this film a little bit more prestige. And speaking of TV actors, you had Moon Unit Zappa in this movie. You had Nancy Fallon in this movie. I always remember Nancy Fallon's on screen.
Anthony Zerbe, he's the father of Tim Quill, the rich guy who's like, I think it's like a senator.
Yeah.
And George Weiner from Spaceballs is the dean of the school, which, and if he does drama, it throws me off because he, to me, is a comedic actor.
He's an all-around actor, but we just know him for comedy. But I love
Fletch. Yeah.
Yeah, I love anytime George Weiner's in a film. You even have Barbara Streisand's son, Jason Gould, in this movie. I feel sorry. I'm sorry. He's also Elliot Gould's son. It's like, Barbara! Oh, yeah, Elliot, too. Again, this feels, like you said, this feels more like it's a film at war with itself, because it's like, this is a teen film, but it also wants to be a drama, but yet, like you said, it feels like a television movie in the end of things. I mean, it's well written, and I think it maybe would have aged a little better if it didn't have Kirk Cameron as the lead, because if anything, now it just adds to his Christian propaganda angle, instead of being even seen as a fair-minded movie, because at the time, even though the abortion issue was hot, it still was like one of those films that, according to their arguments, we see what happens at the end. But, you didn't really have to worry about it, even though it was a big subject. And then, unfortunately, modern times, they did overturn it, in certain states. And now it's like, it's seen as prophetic, or it could be seen as propaganda to certain people. And instead, unfortunately, it's always going to be tainted by that. By no means is this a classic, but it's not. I wouldn't call it a horrible film.
And I wonder too, as when I watched it the first time, how deep into Christianity he was at that time, because he does some stuff you don't ever see him do now in his own Christian movies. I mean, he drops a few curses a few times, and obviously he kisses a woman that's not his wife, although he wasn't married at the time. You have some nudity in there, or implied nudity, when he and Tim Quill are with the girls by the fountain. I mean, was he comfortable, not comfortable? Was he forced to do that? And I think maybe the biggest insult, and this should insult you with your profession, do you ever see anybody on a New York City subway put their fucking face on the goddamn pole?
I unfortunately, there are people who probably have done that.
Especially in the 80s, AIDS and crack.
Hello, we're in the pandemic era or a post-pandemic era. You still have people still blowing their nose into their hand and coughing without covering their mouth. So like, anything is possible, especially in New York City. And yes, I work. That's my profession. This is my profession.
This is your profession. You should quit the other job.
I wish I could, but things called bills can't keep me there.
In due time, my friend, in due time.
But when it comes to this movie, it's one of those things where it's like you want to like it, but there's just so much stuff that's not that great about it that you're just like, I can't. It's not a thing I would ever watch again. But it's this way.
Well, here's the problem, and I'm with you on this. So the script actually is not bad. The issues are there. It's just, outside of having the gravitas of Roy Scheider, Anthony Zerbe, and some of the older actors, and even Jami Gertz is fine for what she has to do, but Kirk Cameron trying to make that transition from TV to movie doesn't work the way it did for Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future, or even Casualties of War. And the other issue is it is very melodramatic.
Oh.
And I'm talking about, particularly as you get into the end of the second act, when Tim Quill's character really begins to crack because Scheider doesn't like his play, and he goes driving like a madman, like almost like he's going to go off a cliff. Like he's a little bit suicidal, if you notice. And then him getting drunk at the party, trying to hit on Jami Gertz, and then trying to rape her in his hotel room, and he like freaks out, and she freaks out. And then that whole scene with him confronting Kirk Cameron outside the street, and then he gets hit by a car. Like, okay, this is going way too far into soap opera territory. I think you had something good, but somebody in your casting department, or Jerry Weintraub or somebody, said, we got to throw some like big name stars, and they have to be all TV stars to get the teens out. And because of that, what could have been maybe your 80s equivalent of The Paper Chase, it ends up becoming something more like a bad John Hughes knockoff picture. And that's what really lets it down, is some of the casting of the young people, specifically Kirk Cameron, and just the overall direction. If you had made this script now, like you said, you could have gotten some solid actors. You could have made this more independent. It could have been more diverse. You could have made this for Amazon or Netflix. And yeah, the topic would definitely get people talking on CNN and MSNBC. And fuck it, just remake this movie, because this is the definition of a film that did not work the first time. But if you made it today, I think it would have been far more successful. And don't let Douglas Day Stewart direct it. Just maybe update the script and give it to, I don't know, Ava DuVernay or somebody to really tackle it and give it 100%.
Well, I'd have no problem with Douglas Day Stewart rewriting it, because again, the script's fine. It's just at the time, the talent that was available and the times. My thing is, don't let Mel Gibson direct it.
Oh God, no.
And I like him as an actor, but don't let James Caviezel play the Roy Scheider part, or it's going to stay in that Kirk Cameron land of Christianity. Though he would be not bad as the senator, but I don't know if it would fit. this could work, like you said, as one of those Amazons, since they're trying to get teens in the film, but then show it as like more dramatic. Like it would work, like as an ensemble. Or even though I hate when they do this, this could be one of those movies where they make it into a series or a limited series and make it work. Like if they wanted to, each episode could explore a different issue that hits hard for the team. See, studios, I am selling you a show. And
That's true. That could work because I feel like, and this is the other issue I have with the movie, so many of the subplots, they don't feel complete, particularly Amanda Peterson's subplot with the romance, I guess, with Christopher Atkins and the fact that she's quadriplegic. It felt like there could have been more you could have added to it. And because you only had so little time and everything was really focused on Cameron, Gertz, and Tim Quill, all the other subplots had to be kind of downplayed. Even the stuff with Scheider where we find out like he's been purposely trying to keep Tim Quill down just so he could excel in debating. There was more to that story that seemed like we just kind of brushed through it, and yet that could have been its own episode of a series.
Well, see, that's the whole thing with this. It's like great ideas, but ultimately it just never could come together because we're getting like all these slices of interesting where I hate to say it, the supporting characters are more interesting than the leads for the most part, but we're forced to stay with the leads. Like, yeah, there's the mystery of Jami Gertz character and why she is the way she is, but pretty much with Kirk Cameron, what we see is what we get. And then Tim Quill just has this like inner yearning to be a writer, and he's just like, most days it would be him hiding his homosexuality. If the film had been made like in the 90s or 2000s.
Yeah.
And like you said, it would be interesting, like if you had an Ava DuVernay remake it, because then it's going to be more diversified, at least. It's not going to be all straight, white, mostly males. Maybe Dan Schneider, whatever you want to consider him. But because like really the only difference in this whole team is Amanda Peterson is like handicapped. That's really as much diversity as this movie offers. And again, Amanda Peterson's storyline is more interesting than the lead. It's sort of like when you watch Footloose and you're like, you know what? Chris Pine and Sarah Jessica Parker are more interesting than Laurie Singer and Kevin Bacon in this movie. You also want to know how, this Jewish young lady is in the middle of Quaker Town. That's a movie in of itself, But like you said, with this movie, it's an interesting misfire that just has so much shit put on it because of who the lead is. But then again, it's more notable because of who the lead is. Because think about it. If you had put, well, he was too young. I was going to say Fred Savage. If you had put whoever was popular in 1989, I don't know, let's say a young Matthew Perry in this film, this would have been considered one of the more forgettable things of the 80s, Like, it might have gotten a little praise, but it definitely wouldn't have been so heavily promoted either,
I could have seen Matthew Perry play the Tim Quill part.
Yeah, he's not going to play Kirk Cameron. Though, I wonder, like, 1989, I don't think River Phoenix would have taken this film, but it would have been an interesting casting.
I think he would have made it more realistic.
Yeah, because he was going to definitely be method, But I think, like, unfortunately, since he passed away so young, if he had made this film, it would have probably been better remembered. Because it would have, even though nobody remembers a night in the life of Jimmy Reardon, but this would have been seen as like one of those, they really tried to make him a star, but it just didn't quite catch on. Mm-hmm. Knowing our luck, we would have got Jason Gedrick in the lead role in the movie, or whoever they were trying to make a star at the time.
Jason Bateman.
Hey, it could have been interesting. He can do the goofy part and the intelligent part. I don't know if he was so intense at that age because look at Bad Words, he can do the intense smart guy, but I don't know when he was making the Hogan Family.
Remember he did that movie Moving Target with Jack Wagner's like a terrorist trying to kill him.
I never saw that movie.
It was a TV movie at the time during when he was on the Hogan Family. It was a thriller. I think it's on Tubi.
I'd watch it just to see Jason Bateman being hunted by a terrorist. It's like, well, you went from Valerie's son to being hunted by a terrorist for no reason. What about Willie? Yeah, this is, like I said, I just have to say, like, I like Douglas Day Stewart as a screenwriter, but this, as they said, this just wasn't it. And I admire him because this was obviously something a little more personal. And I'm going to put it more on the producer in the studio kind of mishandling it,
Yeah.
so that it went from less from personal to more issues based, rather than maybe what he had at heart. So that is what I think about the film. I'm like, I could be wrong. Douglas Day Stewart, if you want, come on, we'll talk about
Yeah,
it.
come on, let's talk about it.
Now,
And also, let's just mention too, this was the first movie soundtrack that featured Celine Dion, and I think it was her first American release before she blew up. So this is predating Titanic and Up Close and Personal. Yeah, she does the theme song with country star Warren Weeby, and it was not a hit, but it brought it to America.
unfortunately, see, I did not even know that. I'm like, well, Celine Dion and Teen Heartthrobs, you know?
Yeah, I think technically she was. She was on a couple of magazines and things in her early time. It was. I feel like it wasn't until she did up close and personal that's when she really like blew up.
Like, well, that's maybe what she needed. Like, this movie would have been perfect for a Diane Warren single at the same time.
Yeah,
And then maybe would have got maybe some Academy Award attention, because it would have been like, well, we don't like the movie, but that song,
yeah, it's pretty good.
you know. But yeah, because I don't have too much other trivia on this film, you know. But I just, like, again, I remember growing up, never seeing it, and then, you know, during the pandemic, that's when you were like, hey, what about that movie? You know, you start looking up those films and trying to find them, and that's how I found this film. And then, you know, interesting of note, we were originally going to do this as a deep dive. Then the Supreme Court handed down the decision,
Yeah,
and we decided it would be in bad taste to do a review of it then. And I think it would have been a more heated show if we had done it then. Now we can kind of sit back, look at it, you know, fair minds, and not be like, oh, fuck this shit. You know, you can sit here and watch the movie, look at it for what it is, you know.
well, yeah. I mean, we just look at it as you know, this great sitcom star who, yes, he found religion and didn't fall into the trap like a lot of troubled child stars, but his views and politics we definitely do not agree on, especially when it comes to this movie.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I'll give Kirk Cameron this at the time. He had the goofy charm. I'll give him that, definitely. But I don't know how much depth there was as an actor. That's the only thing that challenged him. And sadly, to this day, at least me and you, we'll never know. I don't know. I'm not regularly a watcher of his Christian movies.
Well,
So maybe
clearly, after this movie, Hollywood pretty much wiped their hands of him, and Growing Pains is all he was doing. And then he tried to sabotage that show in the last few seasons, as we know.
yeah, but see, it wasn't like he was sabotaging it. Like, I've got to go on the movies. It was just, no, I want this show to line up with my beliefs, even though this is an ensemble show. That would be like if Jaleel White became ultra Christian. What? Fuck you, Winslow. We are talking about God, Jesus every week on the show. No comedy. You know, every episode has to have a moral. You know, and then, you know, that would explain the mass exodus of the cat.
Urkel goes into his little personality changer and he becomes Jesus.
Trust me, I'm sure that wasn't that far off if you watch the later seasons with his Bruce Lee machine.
I'm sure they were all going to walk if they did that.
I don't know. You know, we did get 3J and Richie and Carl as Bruce Lee versions of them. So that's why I'm like, I don't know. When them paychecks keep coming in, you might be willing to do the stupidest thing. Myrtle Urkel and Jaleel White, the 90s answer to Eddie Murphy on television, playing multiple characters.
Yeah.
But that has nothing to do with this. So, is there anything else you have to say about Listen to Me?
I do not recommend it. I think it's just a good script, but a disappointing execution.
I agree. I think it's as you go along Kirk Cameron's career, like father, like son, most watchable, then
Yeah.
a little less watchable. Listen to me. Then whatever he made after that, I don't know, Growing Pains reunion movie.
Yeah, there were two of them.
Yeah, so as you can see, and then he just after those two, he's like full on Christian movies.
Left Behind, Fireproof, Kirk Cameron Saves Christmas. Like, yeah, you're a fucking narcissist, dude.
He's probably cursing Willie Ames like, I couldn't be Bible Man in these Marvel times.
I would be. That's not far off, I think. Bible Man reboot
He just has to remake it and write his own.
for the director of Sound of Freedom.
Hey, it made money, so why not? And James Caviezel will sign on to be the villain. I'm corporate Christmas. It is, I believe in vaccines.
For free.
I'm in full Denver going Santa Claus the mode. Give me a cigar and whiskers. Don't notice my blonde highlights. I got them at the Galleria. So yeah, that's the movie. I ain't gonna run, but that was the movie. I'd want to check that out. Directed by Mel Gibson. And yes, I embrace those evil Muslims that you Christians don't like. I say let them live. Why not? Have you tasted that food? Delicious. They don't like hot dogs. That would be the movie. This will probably be also our first controversial band episode.
Yeah.
By
the way, Julie McCall should come on our show too. We'd like to talk to you.
Yes, hear your side of the story. Do some of your stand-up if you're still doing stand-up.
Absolutely, do the stand-up.
But yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about Listen to Me. Definitely, I'm not gonna say avoid it, but watch it more out of curiosity than need. If you're going to watch it, and be prepared.
Very prepared.
But that ends our business for this episode. But as you know, we always have unfinished business. And until next time, we bid you adieu.